The second day of the high-profile trial involving a former Minneapolis police officer who shot and killed a woman in a Minneapolis alleyway.
Right now, all eyes are on the jury pool as the court analyzes answers from the jurors' questionnaires. Fox 9's Paul Blume is live for us tonight with more on that. Paul?
And Kelsey, it's interesting, based solely on the answers to those written questions and that massive questionnaire prospective jurors got yesterday, the court has already dismissed half a dozen people. The judge saying today she's willing to give prospective jurors a long leash here on prior knowledge that they may come into court with, perhaps knowing that Justine was Australian, that she was unarmed, that she even called 911 for help that night. But these jurors, if they are going to eventually sit on this panel, need to be able to check all of that at the door and decide this case based on what they hear and what they see in that courtroom.
You're going to testify? You're going to testify, Mr. Noor?
No surprise, nearly 2 years of worldwide publicity and scrutiny already impacting jury selection in Mohamed Noor's murder trial. The judge dismissing 6 prospective jurors from the first group of 40 called to serve on the high-profile case. The decision based exclusively on written answers provided to those lengthy questionnaires jurors filled out on Monday. One person had a friend who was a victim of a police shooting. Another wrote that they are tired of police getting away with murder, and then apparently included some nasty comments about Somalis. Juror number 32 writing it was, quote, an unprovoked shooting, that Noor was a fast-track hire, and then again allegedly including some more unwelcoming comments about Somali immigrants. Also in court Tuesday, both sides arguing about some evidence prosecutors eventually want to introduce. It involves newer BCA high-tech imaging that generated a 3D animated fly-through of the shooting scene in the alley behind Justine Ruszczyk-Damon's South Minneapolis home. Prosecutor Patrick Lofton contends it'll give jurors spatial awareness that still images and basic measurements just can't capture. But defense attorney Tom Plunkett believes it doesn't accurately depict the scene, like lighting conditions, and furthermore, he said, it's unproven technology. The animation was played in court, showing Damon's body lying just a few feet away from Noor's squad here at the very end of the last driveway of the alley. She was barefoot. We learned Noor's partner, Matthew Hardy, had gotten out of the vehicle after Noor fired and guided the dying 40-year-old to the ground. And one other interesting issue that surfaced in court late on Tuesday is this idea that prosecutors may now be questioning the storyline that there was a slap or a thump at the back of the squad before Noor fired. Of course, that's something Matt Hardy told investigators in the aftermath. Well, if that didn't happen and the state can prove it, certainly changes the dynamic of this case. Jury selection resumes here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We're live at the Hennepin County Government Center. Paul Blume, Fox 9.
A Minneapolis police officer telling jurors what he says happened the night his partner shot and killed Justine Damon. Paul Blume is live for us. And Paul, Matthew Hardy spent hours today on the witness stand.
And Kelsey, it was compelling testimony. He told this jury that the number one priority on each and every call that he goes out on is his personal safety and security. And then told them he was reaching for his gun as Justine Ruszczyk-Damon approached their squad car in the shadows of that alley nearly 2 years ago. Prosecutors asked him then why he didn't shoot, why he didn't resort to lethal force, and he said, frankly, it was premature and that he was still trying to assess the potential threat of the situation. We've heard his name for nearly 2 years connected to the shooting of Justine Ruszczyk-Damon. For the first time, Matthew Hardy telling his story publicly. His partner, Mohamed Noor, on trial for murder and manslaughter, sitting just feet in front of him in court. Hardy, now 27 years old, described the moments immediately before and after the shooting. Parked at the end of the alley, getting ready to move on to the next call, when all of a sudden, he got what he described as a sixth sense of a silhouette approaching. He reported hearing a murmur, maybe a human voice, and a thump at the back of his squad. As he turned to look over his left shoulder in the driver's seat, he yelled out something to the effect of, "Oh, Jesus," and then a flash and a pop. Noor had fired across him, the bullet flying through the open window, fatally wounding Damon, the 40-year-old 911 caller. Hardy insists he was scared for his life in the moment and was in the process of pulling out his gun. Prosecutors demanded to know about the police work leading up to the encounter and what ratcheted up the call for a female in distress from zero to dangerous in mere seconds.
When they got there, they were only in the alley a total of 1 minute and 57 seconds total. Didn't take a lot of time to formulate exactly what was going on. that they assumed that maybe it was a dog barking or something else had been what the threat had been earlier. It wasn't a woman screaming, so that should have also taken down their tension level at that point. That there were no gestures by Ms. Damon, no statements by Ms. Damon, no weapon they saw by Ms. Damon. None of those things were there.
The jury of 16 also watched Harity Noor's body camera video. Neither had them activated beforehand. The footage picks up with Damon on the ground and Harity calm in control of the scene, performing emergency chest compressions, encouraging the woman to breathe and fight. The defendant is initially seen pacing around before jumping in to try and help save the woman's life. And this trial is now on a 3-day-long Easter weekend break. Witness testimony with the state resumes Monday morning here at 9:15. The question now, given what Matthew Harity had to say on that stand and why he didn't use lethal force, does Mohamed Noor absolutely now have to take the stand and explain to this jury why he did? We're live at the courthouse. Paul Blume, Fox 9.
Paul, today we learned some new details in the trial. You've been keeping us updated on Twitter. And just going over a few of them for our viewers, you mentioned BCA forensics dominating the trial today in Times.
The BCA, several different agents, several different investigators and forensic scientists with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Of course, this agency has been under fire from the state for what the state had described the county attorney as shoddy investigative work from the beginning. It was interesting. There was a special agent on the stand late today who expressed his frustration with MPD and the amount of information they were sharing in the hours after the shooting, describing it as very difficult to start doing their job, but specifically as it relates to forensics. I found this very interesting. Their fingerprint experts took the stand today, and basically we learned there were 51 latent prints lifted off of Mohamed Noor and Matthew Harity's squad car in the hours after the shooting. 51. None of them matched Justine Damon. Of course, there's been all sorts of talk about whether or not the 40-year-old 911 caller somehow slapped or hit the squad car to startle those officers. And what this fingerprint evidence showed is that she didn't touch it, but the defense points out that if she'd hit it with a backhanded slap or her knuckles, that wouldn't have left fingerprint evidence behind. So again, Amy, Randy, that debate is going to continue here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Paul, you also mentioned the Noor blood draw. What was that all about?
Just thought it was interesting. I think we would have already heard if the blood had shown that there was drugs or alcohol in Noor's system, but the special agent in charge who did the blood draw told the jury today no drugs, no alcohol. And of course, Justine Damon, we had already heard her blood had come back. Again, no drugs, no alcohol in her system at the time. So take that out of this equation.
Week 4 of the Mohamed Noor trial wrapping up today with a big development. The defense rested its case.
But not before calling 2 neighbors to the stand who share an alley with Justine Damon.
Fox 9's Paul Blume joins us live from the Hennepin County Government Center. And Paul, Justine's neighbors describing noises in the alley the night she was killed today.
And this was interesting, Karen, for a couple of reasons, primarily because the state just doesn't believe Mohamed Noor and Matthew Harity when they said they were startled by a loud bang or a thud at the back of their squad car. Well, now these 2 neighbors who live on opposite sides of the alley where the shooting occurred report that 2 years ago, the night the shooting occurred, they absolutely remember at least 2 and maybe 3 quick, loud noises in succession, perhaps describing it as a garbage can toppling over, a pew, pew, pew type of a noise effect. They couldn't really articulate exactly what they heard, but this idea that they heard multiple sounds in addition or in conjunction with the gunshot seemed to give credence to the defense argument that there was some kind of loud bang or loud noise in that alley before Mohamed Noor pulled the trigger.
And Paul, Mohamed Noor took the stand for the 2nd day in a row. Yesterday, he said he thought he was saving his partner's life. Did he add to that today?
Well, not necessarily added to it. He survived a difficult cross-examination. He was on the witness stand for about an hour more today. Again, any difficult question that sort of came up when pressed by prosecutors, Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Amy Sweezy, basically it was a split-second decision. The woman at his window raising her arm, the terror and fear he saw in his partner, the partner, Matthew Harity, struggling to get unholstered, the fear he saw in his partner, the surprise of the woman at the window. He said it was a split-second decision, and he kept repeating that line. It was a split-second decision. He made it to pull the trigger. Now this jury will have to decide if he was legally authorized to use deadly force in that moment.
And Paul, we mentioned the defense rested its case. What's next week looking like come Monday?
Well, the state has reserved the right to call at least a rebuttal witness, maybe two. So there could be some brief testimony early Monday morning to clear up a couple of things or try to enhance some of the discrepancies the state sees in the case. But this judge told this jury to go home and then come back to the courthouse Monday prepared to stay. And the reason why that's happening is the judge will sequester this jury. So we expect closing arguments Monday afternoon. Then the jury will have the case and they will not be allowed to leave. They'll deliberate during business or court hours, and then they will retire to hotel rooms. They cannot have any contact with the outside world. They must stay together. And the judge gave those jurors today the order to come prepared to do jury duty on Monday and then prepared to stay as long as it takes to reach a verdict on those 3 counts Mohamed Noor is facing.
But Paul Blume will be making his way down to the courtroom. In fact, here he is right now. And we get a microphone, and Paul, you can let everybody know, fresh out of the courtroom, what these verdicts are.
Yeah, good evening. I just left a stunned courtroom. Mohamed Noor, guilty, third-degree murder. Mohamed Noor, guilty, second-degree manslaughter. Per the request of prosecution, Mohamed Noor was immediately taken into custody. He was handcuffed and escorted out. Again, just trying to catch my breath. We ran down the floor. But Mohamed Noor, a Minnesota police officer, a former officer now, fired after this shooting. After shooting and killing Justine Ruszczyk-Damon in the alley behind her home on July 15, 2017, Mohamed Noor, guilty, third-degree murder, as well as second-degree manslaughter. The judge, after the jurors were dismissed, she thanked the jurors for their service, their dedication to this case. She remanded Mohamed Noor to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, and he heads to jail tonight. Sentencing was set for a later date in June. The courtroom was stunned silence. Noor bowed his head slightly. He respectfully was taken into custody, put his arms behind his back, his hands were cuffed, and he walked out.
Our Paul Blume has been in the courtroom for this entire court trial so far. And Paul, you were just in with a news conference with the county attorney, Mike Freeman. Bring us up to speed on everything that's happened here within the last hour.
Well, a shocking afternoon here. Stunning just in terms of the speed of this verdict. The jury coming back with 2 guilty verdicts on third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. And then just moments ago, hearing from the Hennepin County attorney, as well as the family and loved ones of Justine Damon. Her father has flown in all the way from Australia. This family has sat through the entire proceedings. Don Damon, Justine's fiancé, he's from Minneapolis. She moved here for him and his son. He was on a business trip in Las Vegas on July 15, 2017. They were exchanging phone calls, text messages. Justine was concerned. She was hearing noises, a female in distress in the alley behind her home. Her and Don conferred over text messages and phone conversations that Justine should call 911. She called 911, not once, but twice. She was so concerned about human life in that alley. She was so concerned that another woman was being hurt near her home. Don testified that she was calling the people that they trusted for help. Matthew Harity, Mohamed Noor arrived in that alley. We don't know exactly what happened or how Justine Damon got to the end of the alley. It happened several homes down from where she lived. It's presumed she went out into the alley, probably chased after the squad car to let them know where the noises were being heard, perhaps just to talk to them. She had called twice. She was apparently frustrated with the lack of attention to her initial call, and she went out to meet police at the squad car. As prosecutors have said all along, that's a normal everyday occurrence in America. The squad car is the moving police station. The squad car is somewhere you go when you need help, when you need assistance. That's what Justine Damon did that night, and she was shot and killed. Matthew Harity telling one story from the driver's seat. Important to note, he said he was startled. There was a noise at the back of his squad. The state disputes that fact. Mike Freeman, I asked him point blank, what does he believe happened in that alley? He said the jury basically decided what happened in that alley, and you can use your own judgment from that. But that Matthew Harity pulled out his gun, did not shoot. But just across the way from him in that small squad SUV, Mohamed Noor assessed the situation differently. He described as seeing Harity fearing for his life, fumbling to get at his gun. So Noor, in the moment, he told the jury he saw a woman at his window. He saw a, quote, blonde-haired woman wearing a pink T-shirt. And in that moment, he didn't see her hands. He said she raised her right arm, and in that millisecond, he relied on his training and fearing for the life of his partner right next to that driver window. He fired across Matthew Harity, killing Justine Damon. Well, today, the jury said enough is enough. This is not going to be tolerated. This officer was not justified in using deadly force in that moment. They found him guilty of 2 very serious crimes, prison commit sentences ahead, several years in prison, likely for Mohamed Noor. The charges so serious, these convictions so serious, the judge immediately ordered him into custody. He was handcuffed in front of his parents and his wife in that courtroom, and he has now been booked as of 5/21 across the street in the Hennepin County Jail.
Hi. I can hear someone out the back, and I'm not sure if she's having sex or being raped.
Give me the address.
5024 Washburn Avenue South.
Washburn Avenue South. Okay, and you said it's behind.
And there's a lane out the back. Yep. Okay. Yep. And I think she just yelled out, help.
For the first time, we are hearing Justine Damon call 911 the night she was shot and killed by Minneapolis police officer Mohamed Noor.
Those calls were part of some 300 exhibits recently presented to the jury that found Mohamed Noor guilty.
Tonight, Fox 9's Paul Blume takes a closer look at that evidence and shows us the roadmap prosecutors used to get a conviction. Paul, you saw this evidence weeks ago in the courtroom, some of it very sensitive.
Amy and Kelsey, as we said throughout the trial, the evidence is hard to stomach, and the judge still has not yet released the most graphic of the video footage, including Damon's final agonizing moments. This evening, we've tried to take great care to share a small piece of what happened the night of July 15, 2017. That started with a pair of 911 calls from Justine Damon and ultimately ended with a Minneapolis police officer convicted of murder.
I have no idea what happened. All we heard is shots fired, then we came here.
With emergency life-saving efforts continuing on Justine Damon, body-worn camera footage capture Minneapolis police officers confused as they established a crime scene.
At first I thought maybe he shot somebody.
He did.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
he hit the person?
In the stomach.
Really?
I think she's, I don't know what the deal
Shut up.
Prosecutors had attacked MPD for the way it handled the initial scene in terms of gathering evidence, sharing information, and shutting off their cameras. Here, Sergeant Shannon Barnett, who assumed the leadership role of incident commander before the investigation was eventually turned over to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, spoke to Mohamed Noor's partner, Matthew Harity.
She just came up out of nowhere on the side of the thing, and we both got spooked. I had my gun out, I didn't fire, and then Noor pulled out and fired.
Prosecutors told the jury repeatedly that in the heat of the moment, Harity never mentioned a slap or bang on their squad, or that he feared for his life. Noor, meanwhile, was escorted to another vehicle, getting advice and some comfort from a senior officer along the way.
You all right? Yeah. Just keep keep your mouth shut until you have to say anything to anybody. Hop in and say a ringer.
Another piece of evidence that put this jury at the scene's immediate aftermath. Cell phone video shot by a teenage bicyclist pedaling through the neighborhood.
What's happening, sir?
Just back up for him. Just back up. You can videotape, just back up.
Harity crouched down, encouraging Damon to stay with him, while telling Noor to remain calm and turn on his body camera as Noor paces away.
Ma'am, stay with me.
It is eerily quiet at the end of that alley in the moments before officers descended and Damon was pronounced dead. An innocent, unarmed 911 caller shot to death by police outside her home. And since that trial, Justine's family settled a civil lawsuit with the city of Minneapolis for a record $20 million. Noor currently in custody at the state's maximum security prison, Oak Park Heights. He will be sentenced next month. His defense attorneys have asked the court to toss out his murder and manslaughter convictions. We're live in the newsroom tonight. Paul Blume, Fox 9.
These are the people I worked to serve, and I harmed them in the worst way possible. Again, I apologize.
Despite his emotional public apology Friday, Mohamed Noor has begun serving his 12-and-a-half-year prison sentence.
Noor's murder conviction, a rarity in the U.S., where a police officer is charged, convicted, and ultimately sentenced for murder stemming from an on-duty incident.
Tonight, we're hearing for the first time directly from the Hennepin County prosecution team that spent nearly 2 full years pursuing justice in the shooting death of Justine Ruszczyk-Damond. Here's Fox 9's Paul Blume.
There is no case that we could find.
I'm not sure if she's having sex or being raped.
Where an unarmed 911 caller gets shot.
Prosecutors Patrick Lofton and Amy Sweezy giving us a fascinating glimpse inside their trial strategy.
It was immensely challenging.
From the research,
you will not find in Minnesota reported case law another situation where a court has departed from the sentencing guidelines requiring, in a murder case, a prison sentence and give probation.
To their presentation of a voluminous amount of video and physical evidence.
You all right? Yeah. Just keep your mouth shut till you have to say anything you like.
As well as their sometimes intense courtroom questioning of witnesses, including the defendant himself.
Jurors have to decide who was telling the truth.
It was a blueprint that produced a rare murder conviction of a police officer for an on-duty shooting.
The law is not whether the officer who is on trial felt fear. The law is whether a reasonable officer in the same position, using the phrase we heard so much of, the totality of those circumstances, would have acted the same way and used the force that the defendant in this case did.
The defendant fired his gun over the body of his partner. He did that in a residential neighborhood. He did that without saying a word. He did it despite the fact that Ms. Ruszczyk had not said a word. He did it despite the fact that nothing was in her hands besides a cell phone.
On Friday, Judge Catherine Quainton sentenced Mohamed Noor to 12.5 years in prison, bringing some closure to a painful 2-year legal odyssey.
This case has inflicted damage so vast and so far-flung on so many people.
The attorneys believe the trial hinged on 3 key factors. 1, the early testimony of veteran Minneapolis homicide detectives who told jurors something at the scene in one of the city's quietest and safest neighborhoods didn't add up, with an unarmed woman shot to death in her pajamas.
I think that cued them in as to where this was going.
2, the state's pair of expert witnesses who articulated how and why Noor was unreasonable in his assessment of the threat he and his partner Matthew Harity faced at the end of the alley.
That was obviously a very important moment in the trial.
And 3, the credibility of Noor himself on the stand, telling a story that Lofton and Sweezy insist just did not add up and differed significantly from Harity's version of events in the seat right next to him.
As far as what happened inside that car, we had the word of Officer Harity. And Officer Harity had said, as he said at the trial, he couldn't see the person. He couldn't make out man, woman, child. At best, it was a silhouette.
And what if Mohamed Noor had just come forward early on, before the Hennepin County Attorney's Office convened a grand jury, and admitted he made a tragic miscalculation in fearing a potential ambush? Would they have pursued murder charges?
You'd certainly have a very different case then. I think that potentially, if that had happened, it would be more in the manslaughter realm than third-degree murder or second-degree murder. But it would certainly be in the manslaughter realm.
And for anyone who believes that race or class had no place in this outcome, I need only point you to the words of Amy Sweezy, the prosecutor, when she said her whole blonde hair, pink t-shirt, that was a threat to you. Had it been my mother in that alley, Amy Sweezy would never have said her whole blackness, her hijab, that was a threat to you?
In the hours immediately before and after sentencing, Noor's family and supporters voiced their anger and frustration over what they claimed was a racist prosecution that turned the Somali immigrant into a scapegoat for shoddy police training. Sweezy and Lofton's response, not true.
The same set of facts, north side, black victim at the end of that alley. Is this case prosecuted, investigated as vigorously and tried as intensely as this one?
Absolutely.
In every way, shape, and form, yeah.
Do you think the result would have been the same?
Yeah.
Yes.
The primary concern of the jurors who heard the testimony in this case, when I spoke with them after the verdict, was, will there be changes? Change is needed.
At sentencing, Judge Quaintance described jurors who knew next to nothing about the July 2017 shooting of Justine Ruszczyk Damon at the start of trial, recognizing a troubled, perhaps even a broken system after their deliberations. Prosecutors, though, optimistic something positive will eventually come out of the tragedy for a community just beginning to heal.
So there are always opportunities to do better, and I think that hopefully one of the positive legacies that will come out of Ms. Justine Ruszczyk's death, and I know one that's very important for her family, is that there be change, and we're already starting to see that.
In Minneapolis, Paul Blume, Fox 9.